In an awakened nervous system, stability, coherence, and depth emerge as the natural foundation of embodied awakening. These qualities are not created through effort or discipline, but through the body's return to its natural, uncontracted state. When the nervous system is no longer organized around fear, it stops fragmenting experience into opposing parts. Instead, life begins to move through the body as a unified, continuous flow. Stability arises as a grounded presence that remains steady regardless of external circumstances. It is the quiet confidence of a system that no longer anticipates danger in every sensation or situation. Coherence follows naturally from this stability. In a coherent nervous system, the inner world is no longer divided by competing impulses of protection, control, and resistance. Thoughts, emotions, and sensations move through awareness without triggering internal struggle. What once felt like inner conflict is revealed to have been physiological tension, a body attempting to manage perceived threats. When the survival system relaxes, this fragmentation dissolves and experience becomes seamless. Decisions no longer feel like battles. Emotions arise and complete themselves naturally. And the mind loses its tendency to escalate sensations into narratives of danger. From this coherence, depth becomes accessible. Depth is not intensity or complexity, but a quiet intimacy with experience. Without resistance within the nervous system, awareness settles into a profound stillness where life can be felt directly. Sensations, emotions, and thoughts arise within a spacious field that is no longer fighting itself. In this silence, the body becomes a sanctuary, a place where experience can unfold without defense or distortion. Life is met from clarity rather than tension, and each moment is lived from the center of being rather than the edges of survival. Stability, coherence, and depth therefore mark the maturation of the somatic path. They reveal a nervous system that has remembered how to live without internal resistance, allowing awareness and embodiment to function as one integrated movement of life. The absence of inner conflict is one of the most recognizable qualities of an awakened nervous system. It does not arise through discipline, mental control, or the suppression of difficult thoughts and emotions. Instead, it emerges naturally when the nervous system is no longer organized around fear. What we commonly experience as inner conflict is not truly a psychological problem, but a physiological one. It reflects a body that has learned to brace against experience, generating competing impulses that attempt to manage perceived danger. One part of the system tries to protect, another pushes for change, and another attempts to suppress what is being felt. This fragmentation creates the internal tension we interpret as conflict. When the nervous system awakens, this pattern begins to dissolve.
Experience is no longer divided into what must be resisted and what is allowed. Sensations, emotions, and thoughts are permitted to arise without being opposed by defensive reactions. Because nothing inside the body is fighting what is happening, the sense of being pulled in multiple directions disappears. Decisions become simpler, not because life becomes easier, but because there is no internal struggle demanding certainty or safety before action can occur. Emotions move cleanly through the system and resolve themselves without leaving behind layers of judgment or self-criticism. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer trigger the survival response that once amplified them into anxiety or doubt. They pass through awareness like ripples on calm water rather than storms moving through a fragile system. The most profound result of this absence of conflict is a deep inner silence. It is not emptiness but harmony, the quiet of a nervous system that is no longer fighting itself. From this coherence, life becomes direct and uncomplicated, as awareness and sensation function together within a single field of experience. In an awakened nervous system, ease in sensation and emotion arises not because life becomes free of difficulty, but because the body no longer interprets its internal experience as a threat. Sensations and emotions are allowed to exist exactly as they are, without the reflexive need to control, suppress, or transform them. The nervous system is no longer bracing against what it feels. As a result, the body experiences its inner world with openness rather than resistance. Sensation is simply sensation and emotion is simply emotion, movements within the living field of awareness rather than problems that must be solved. In an unregulated system, sensations often trigger mental interpretations that intensify discomfort. A tightening in the chest may be labeled as fear, a heaviness in the stomach may be interpreted as danger, or a surge of energy may be seen as something going wrong. These interpretations activate the survival response, causing the body to contract around the experience. The discomfort people struggle with is rarely the sensation itself, it is the resistance and narrative layered on top of it. As awakening stabilizes in the nervous system, this pattern dissolves. Sensations no longer escalate into stories, and emotions no longer solidify into identities. They arise, move through the body, and complete themselves naturally. Without resistance, emotional energy flows and resolves instead of becoming trapped in cycles of rumination or defense. This ease does not numb experience, it deepens it. The body becomes capable of feeling life more fully because it no longer fears what it feels. Joy, sadness, intensity, and calm all move through the same open space of awareness. In this way, sensation and emotion become part of a continuous rhythm of life rather than disruptions to it. The awakened nervous system meets each experience with openness, allowing the full movement of life to unfold without struggle. In an awakened nervous system, ego reactivity begins to dissolve, not because the ego has been defeated or suppressed, but because the conditions that once required its defensive responses are no longer present. The ego originally forms as a protective physiological pattern within the nervous system, arising when the body contracts in response to overwhelm or perceived threat.
What later appears as egoic reactions, defensiveness, control, judgment, or the need to protect identity, are simply the nervous system attempting to maintain safety. When the body learns through direct experience that it no longer needs to brace against life, these protective reactions begin to soften. Situations that once triggered immediate defensiveness are met with openness instead. Criticism no longer feels like an attack on identity. Uncertainty no longer demands control. Emotional intensity no longer activates the urgent need to protect the self. The nervous system remains regulated, allowing awareness to meet experience directly rather than through the filters of fear and self-protection. As reactivity fades, the sense of a solid, defended identity also begins to loosen. The ego's patterns were never expressions of the true self. They were strategies designed to manage vulnerability. When the body no longer perceives the world as threatening, those strategies naturally lose their purpose. The mind may still produce thoughts, preferences, and opinions, but they no longer carry the urgency of survival. What replaces ego reactivity is a calm responsiveness rooted in presence. Instead of reacting automatically, the awakened nervous system allows space between stimulus and response. From that space, action arises with clarity and appropriateness rather than habit. Life is no longer navigated through defense, but through direct participation in the moment. In this way, the end of ego reactivity does not remove the human personality. It simply frees it from the constant tension of protecting itself. In an awakened nervous system, the body is no longer experienced as something separate from awareness but as the living vessel through which presence expresses itself. What once felt like a personal body carrying a separate self begins to reveal itself as a field of sensation within awareness. The distinction between awareness and embodiment softens, and the body becomes the place where presence is continuously lived rather than something one occasionally returns to in meditation or reflection. This shift occurs because the nervous system is no longer dominated by contraction and survival responses. When fear, tension, and defensive bracing relax, the body becomes transparent to the deeper intelligence that animates life. Breath, sensation, movement, and emotion are experienced directly, without the layers of resistance and interpretation that once obscured them. The body stops functioning as a barrier between the individual and the world and instead becomes the medium through which life flows. In this state, presence is not an altered experience but the natural background of every moment. Simple activities such as breathing, walking, speaking, and listening become expressions of the same underlying awareness. The body moves with a quiet coherence because it is no longer attempting to defend an identity or manage constant internal tension. Instead, it participates in life as part of a larger unfolding. As this stabilization deepens, the body begins to feel less like something we possess and more like something we inhabit as awareness itself. Experience becomes intimate and immediate. Sensation becomes the language of presence, and the body becomes the living interface between the infinite field of awareness and the human form through which it expresses itself.
In an awakened nervous system, the body gradually returns to a state that can be described as its original innocence. This innocence does not mean naivety or the absence of life experience. Rather, it reflects a nervous system that is no longer organized around fear, defense, and the constant anticipation of threat. The layers of protection that once shaped perception begin to soften, allowing the body to meet life directly rather than through the filters of past conditioning. From early life, the nervous system learns to contract in response to overwhelm, uncertainty, or emotional pain. These contractions become protective patterns that shape identity, perception, and behavior. Over time, the body learns to brace against experience as a way of maintaining safety. While these responses were once necessary, they often remain long after the original conditions have passed, leaving the nervous system operating in a state of quiet vigilance. As awakening unfolds through the body, these patterns gradually release. The nervous system begins to recognize that it no longer needs to hold itself in a defensive posture. Breath deepens, muscles soften, and the body returns to a more open and receptive state. Experience is no longer approached with suspicion or resistance but with a natural curiosity and ease. This return to innocence is not a regression to childhood but a maturation beyond survival-based conditioning. The body regains its natural capacity to trust life as it unfolds. Sensations, emotions, and relationships are encountered without the reflexive need to control or protect against them. In this way, the awakened nervous system remembers a deeper truth, that beneath the layers of defense and adaptation, the body was always designed to meet life with openness, presence, and trust.
Hi, I'm Jim Daunt, and thank you for watching my videos. Just want to let you know the videos from the last about 2 months have all been based on my new book. It's coming out March 31st It's both on Kindle and on paperback on Amazon, and it's now available for pre-order on Kindle if you're interested.